If you've been scrolling through endless lists of gaming laptops, watching video after video trying to figure out which model actually lives up to the hype, and still feel stuck wondering whether the price tag really matches the playtime you'll get, this review is here to clear that up. I've spent the last few weeks putting the Acer Nitro V through a mix of workday tasks, late-night raid sessions, and a couple of trips to the coffee shop just to see how it behaves outside the bedroom desk. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the core dilemma most buyers face. You need a machine that can handle the newest titles at a respectable frame rate, but you also want it to double as a decent workstation for spreadsheets, streaming, and maybe a little video editing without constantly draining the battery. The Nitro V positions itself as an all-rounder with a 7th-gen Intel Core processor, 16GB of DDR5 RAM, and an RTX 5050 GPU built on NVIDIA's Blackwell architecture. Those are impressive numbers on paper, but the real test is how they translate to everyday use. When I opened the box, the first thing I noticed was the 16-inch WUXGA IPS panel rocking a 180Hz refresh rate. For gamers, that means a lot smoother motion in fast shooters, and for movie watchers it reduces flicker during long streaming marathons. I fired up Apex Legends at 1080p with settings cranked up to high. The frame count hovered around 7,885 FPS, which stayed solid even when I toggled DLSS on. The AI-powered DLSS really shines here, smoothing out the edge details without a noticeable ghosting effect. In a practical sense, that means you can keep the graphics turned up and still enjoy fluid gameplay without choking the laptop's power budget. Now, let's flip the screen to a non-gaming scenario. I ran a 30-minute batch render in Adobe Premiere using a 4K source file. The 1TB Gen 4 SSD made the import and export cycles zip by. I was surprised at how little the laptop taxed the CPU during that task. The i7 chip, paired with DDR5, handled multitasking without hitch. However, there is a trade-off. The internal cooling system, while marketed as advanced dual fan, gets audible when the GPU is under sustained load. During the render, I could hear a faint whine that grew louder as the fans ramped up to keep temperatures below 85 C. It's not a deal-breaker for most, but if you need a whisper-quiet workstation for a shared office or late-night study sessions, you'll notice it. One of the hidden benefits of the Nitro V is the Wi-Fi 6 module. I tested the connection on a crowded campus network, and the latency stayed consistently low, even when several devices were competing for bandwidth. That translates to smoother online gameplay and fewer dropped frames when you're competing in fast-paced esports titles. The comprehensive connectivity options, including a full set of USB-C, USB-A, HDMI 2.1, and a dedicated Ethernet port, also mean you won't be scrambling for adapters when you need to plug in external monitors or a VR headset. So, who should actually consider buying this laptop? If you're a mid-range gamer who wants a machine that can comfortably run the latest titles at 1080p with high settings, while also serving as a solid daily driver for creative work, the Nitro V checks a lot of boxes. The 16GB of RAM is a sweet spot for most modern games and multitasking scenarios, and the 1TB SSD gives you enough room for a sizable game library and media files without immediate need for external storage. The laptop also appeals to students in design or engineering programs who need a portable yet powerful solution for CAD software, 3D modeling, or video editing. On the flip side, there are clear cases where you might want to skip this model. If you're chasing native 4K gaming at ultra settings, the RTX 5050, while competent, won't match the performance of a higher-tier RTX 4060 or 4070. Similarly, if you prioritize a silent work environment, think of a writer or a podcaster who records in the same room as the laptop. The fan noise under load may be distracting. Those users would get more peace of mind from a laptop that leans on a larger chassis and more aggressive passive cooling solutions, even if that means paying a bit more. A practical weakness that became apparent after a few days of real use is the battery life. With the 180Hz panel and the RTX 5050 running, the battery drains to about 30% in just under an hour of mixed use. If you plan to game unplugged for longer sessions, you'll need to keep the charger handy. Conversely, for the typical work and play day where you're mostly plugged in, the battery isn't a huge hurdle. Another point worth mentioning is the keyboard. The backlit keys are bright enough to type in dim rooms, and the key travel feels satisfying for both gaming keystrokes and long typing stretches. However, the absence of a dedicated macro row means you'll have to rely on software key bindings if you're into complex in-game shortcuts. It's not a fatal flaw, but it's something you'll notice if you're used to.